so it's a little bit, you know, more complex than what they do in here. The fire service has kind of dumbed us down over the years. And so I'm going to follow through with this so we make sure we cover the chapter and cover everything in here, but we're going to put a lot of information in between it, in between the lines that we're going to color in that thing. So there's an outline, rough outline with a lot of holes in it. We're going to put some more dots in there, connect a whole bunch of dots and color in between it, so hopefully it gives you a clearer picture. Now that being said, as we start this today, you guys are going to, this is going to be really confusing for you today. And when we start this thing, you're not going to get this information today. Okay, all you're going to do is you start to get an understanding of it. Okay, but if you don't get this information today, it's kind of like, how many guys here are math guys? Perfect. You good with math?
Decent.
Okay, good. We're going to find out here. So actually what we're going to do is we're going to use a lot of numbers in this thing. And, you know, 1 and 1 makes 2. Okay? 1 and 1 don't make 3. And so we're going to try and we're going to give you guys lots of numbers. By the end of the day, it's going to get pretty confusing. You're going to go, oh, shoot, I'm not going to remember all that stuff. Okay? But the repetition through here, we're going to give it to you over and over and over again. Okay? Now, a lot of these numbers that I've put together, okay, they're not in this book. Okay? They're out there in the standards and the science, but they're not in the book. But all those numbers relate to what this book says. Now, that being said, getting back to what we're saying is that this is a journey, okay? And it's going to take you guys 12 weeks to finally get your mind around this thing, because the fire service and our education system does not educate us properly, okay? They don't give us the tools. So what we're going to try to do is give you guys tools. When you leave here, you can take those tools and put them to use where you work. I mean, it's not like school where they teach you a bunch of stuff, then all of a sudden you go out there in the workforce and go, this stuff don't relate. Okay, how does this work? We're going to try and give you the stuff here that you can take out and say, oh, that matches right up. This works. Okay? And that's what we're going to try and do with this stuff. Now, is it easy? No, it is not easy. Okay, it's not easy. This is really, thermodynamics is really a complex problem. Okay, that's why we haven't identified what the fire is, you know, that electromagnetic energy and how that thing comes about, how it takes place. Still don't understand it. Okay? So there's a lot of interrelating issues that come in there that are really complex to understand. Now, does that mean that we're going to know? We're going to break it down. At the end of the day, we're going to come down to this. Okay, we're going to get some rule of thumb, ballpark things, okay, that work. But if we don't understand the science, don't understand where stuff comes from, okay, when we get to that, we have a problem, we're going to have a hard time figuring that problem out. And that's what we have to do when we get to the scene. We have to figure out problems, and we have to solve problems. Okay, so we have to have some knowledge to pull from to solve those problems. Okay, now fire is a complex problem, so that means we're going to have a lot of information. If they try to, you know, if we try to dumb you down and don't give you and just say put to us on the rest of it, you're never going to solve the problem, and you're going to get in trouble. Okay, so this thing is going to be pretty complicated here, you know, for several weeks for you. Now, some may find it easier, some may find it a little bit harder. But if you do, remember this is a team effort. You guys need to work with each other and help each other get this understanding. Okay, you may not understand it just how I say it, but somebody else may be able to explain what I'm saying to the other person, you know, in a way that they can understand it. Okay, and that's what you guys need to do. You're going to start team building, working together, because when you get in the fire service, you got to learn how to work with your partners. When you guys go inside that building, you better be thinking on the same page. If you guys are on a different page, you're going to get in trouble. And this is where you start that process here, is learning how to work with the other guys that you're working with, learning their strong points and their weak points, okay, and how to make a team out of that. Okay, and that's what this journey's about. There ain't no magic to it. It's just hard work. That being said, obviously my name is Ralph Omlet. I'm one of those retired guys. I retired in '98 from the Everett Fire Department, so I've been out a little bit. And I tried to get away from this thing. I tried to, you know, I retired in '98. I was done with the fire service. I don't want to have anything to do with it. Okay, government. And so anyway, I tried to hide for about 5 years, and after about 5 years, they hooked me up here, so I've been up here ever since, trying to help out. Not saying that I'm helping out much, but anyway, I've been up here trying to make more sense out of it. And a lot of the stuff, all the stuff that I've put together here, I put together out in the field. Okay, so one of the things that complaints that I used to get there at the Everett Fire Department was that you know, when I meet company officer and I'd be given a class, the guys would bitch and complain. They say, "Oh shit, all that Ralph does, all he does is he just goes in and reads a book and then comes out and gives us a class." And I'd say, "Well, what do you want me to do? Make it up?" Okay. So the point being is I try to give them relevant information to the science of our industry. Okay. And so with that, you know, that's what I try to do each time I was at the fire. If I went to a fire and I had a problem, I'd always try to come back and evaluate it, see how I could make it better, and then study the science so that when I got to that fire, that I could solve that problem. Okay? And without the understanding, it's tough to solve that problem, because where you guys go to work, your working environment revolves around one magic number. Okay? And I just said the number. What's the number? 1. And what does that one relate to? All the firefighting. All firefighting is based around a 1-minute formula. Water application for structural flammable, liquid flammable gas is all calculated on 1 minute. Okay? So all the work you do is in that 1 minute arena, so you don't have a lot of time. Okay? And so that's where we're going to draw that perspective, hopefully today, and through the water application, is what that relationship is that takes place. You need to understand your relationship to your environment and what takes place. Okay? So Todd's here today to help with the fire behavior. Todd, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Actually, I'm an interpreter for Chief Omelette today. Chief Omelette has been up here since, what, a year and a half after 08? Is that when you came up here? We were up here a year and a half.
I think so. Yeah.
So I started in 08 up here as a recruit academy coordinator with Chief Frank Garza from the Tacoma Fire Department. Came through as a recruit in 88. Graduated high school in 84. I came back as a company officer in 93. 93-1. Instructor coordinator in 96-1. Under the old academy, it used to be firefighters would come up here, company officers would be sent up from their department, and then either a battalion chief or somebody with officer rank would come up as the instructor coordinator. So when I came through in 96-1, I really enjoyed the academy a lot. But if you look at your plaques in your dormitories, you'll see that the attendance started going down, right? And it got to a point where they contracted out to Bates Technical College. Anybody been through Bates? Please raise your hand. No Bates? All right. Sometimes we'll get people that have gone through Bates and now they come through here. So we contracted out to Bates, and the state wanted to take it back over, so they formed a committee, and I happened to be in the training division at SeaTac Fire Department at that time. Went to the committee meetings and then applied to be the Recruit Academy coordinator up here. And Frank Garza and I knew each other personally, and they selected us two to job share. And when we came through this Recruit Academy, we had our first company officer, John Tanaka, which you'll meet later on in the academy. And John actually introduced me to Ralph. And Ralph came up here, and with me, John, Ralph, and a couple other instructors, Rich Schroner and Mike Josephitis, which you'll meet, and you'll, instead of trying to remember Josephitis, he'll tell you to call him Juice, which is a heck of a lot easier. Saying Josephitis is easier than spelling it too. So, when Ralph came up here, we met on the path out here, and John had prepared me for meeting Ralph, and we stood there for probably an hour and a half. I think he's seen my eyes finally roll back into my head, and he knew that I had, you know, checked out. I've been full. So said goodbye to him. I ran into the office, which I had an office up here at that time. I wrote down as much information as I could possibly remember. I've spent the last few years just going over that information over and over and over again. And together as a team, with Ralph really helping us solve the problems, we've added to the information, right? And he's been a great friend and a great mentor, a great teacher for me, and I'm happy to be here with him today teaching fire behavior. So hopefully today, there'll be those moments where you're going to be like, wow, that's a lot of numbers, that's a lot of information. If there's a question, raise your hand, okay? And the chief has the ability to kind of look at a picture and have it in his head, and then have these numbers associated with that picture. And what's important for us is to be able to see that picture that he's seeing as well. So I'll probably support him by drawing some of these pictures up here that he's going to be using, and hopefully we'll get the picture across to you so that when you go down in 2 days and you see that fire behavior, it's what you thought it would be. Okay? And then the rest of your journey will just continue developing those pictures, and Chief will bring in the science with the numbers and make that science and numbers mean something, so that you have a good foundation to improve your career on. Is there anybody in here that hasn't seen the movie Matrix or the Matrix series? You haven't?
I haven't.
Okay, so in the first movie, do you remember the first movie? He's in that hallway and Mr. Anderson's after him, right? And it gets that, isn't the first movie where this happens, where he gets that transition from seeing, right, the world around him, and it transfers into numbers? Everybody remember that? That's the chief. He goes in and out of that matrix world right there. Okay. So it's called senility. Okay. So he can take those pictures, and they can be a series of eyes and nose for him, right? And then he can transfer back. And so we'll see that you'll see that what I'm talking about here throughout the day, that learning this can be overwhelming. He's probably already said this. The first time you hear a song, you like the tune of it. Do you know the words? What do you first pick up on when you listen to a song? Yeah. What's the first part you start singing? The chorus, right? So you get the chorus down. So that's what we're looking to do, get the chorus down. And then you're going to go back and you're going to be hearing these same words over and over until you can memorize them, and then it matching up with that picture in your experience, where it's really going to mean something for you. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm a captain right now on shift with the City of SeaTac Fire Department. I'm an independent contractor up here, so anything I say up here doesn't represent the City of SeaTac Fire Department. And the reason I'm bringing that up is there's been some controversy in the last couple of years about people wearing department uniforms and going to conferences and speaking as guest speakers, and their views not necessarily representing the department for the uniform that they're wearing. So as an independent contractor, I am representing the Washington State Patrol here, and not the City of SeaTac. Okay? All right.
All right. So that's it. So again, we ain't no expert. I ain't no expert on this stuff. All I do is I've had a little bit of experience in this arena. Okay. So I spent like 23 years as a company officer on the right hand side. That's why I stayed for a long time, because I like going interior fighting fire. And so I was a public servant. I believe in public service. I believe in government doing what they're supposed to do. So you'll see that my views, and that's back, I might come across a little bit. There's left and there's right. There's Democrat, Republican. Well, I'm so far right that I almost come back around on the other side of it. Okay? So I'm very conservative on what I do and my views and my points. And not, so just so you know where I'm at and how I come about. I want to know that that what I do is correct, and my job is to work for those people that pay me, not for the people that hired me, but for the people that pay me, which is the citizens. That's who I work for. Okay, and so with that, I tried to do the best job I could when I got there. Okay, and as we go through this series here, and I'll give you a few, talk about a few war stories, a few things, philosophy and stuff, but we'll show you how these things come about and what takes place and what my journey was. Now your journey may be totally something different, but I doubt that it will be. It's going to be the same thing, because you're going into the same thing that I went into, which is government. Government, hasn't done its job. They haven't. This book has not done its job. This thing here does not give you the information you need. If you took this information, tried to go out and fight fire with it, you'd kill yourself. Okay? There's a lot of information missing in this book. Okay? That you need to understand. Okay, that's why guys are dying right now. They're getting killed because of what? When the guys down there, what was that last big one that lost everybody, Todd? furniture store.
Right. Charleston, North Carolina.
Yeah, I don't keep track of all that, I mean, I'm out of there, but anyway, Charleston, for example, right there. Okay, what happened? Those guys firefighters? Yeah, okay, volunteer in combination department. Okay, so they went in to fight fire and ended up killing themselves. Why did they do that? Because they're not trained. Okay? When you guys leave here, you won't do that. Because you're gonna know your job, or at least you're gonna be given the information to know your job. How to identify what you can do and what you can't do. What are your capability and your limitations? Okay? Now it's up to you to remember it. Okay? We can lay the information out for you. Okay? But it's up to you to remember. Okay? Now that information, is that in this book? It is not in this book. Okay? Okay, but we will explain what that information is. Now I can only do it to the best of sciences. Okay? And so with that, what you have to do, and this is, I say, it has to pass. Everything for me has to pass the common sense rule. Okay? And that is, if and I'll say to you guys, if it don't make sense, don't use it. But if it makes sense, why aren't you using it? Okay? And that's the problem that we have out here, is that a lot of stuff in here don't make sense. I'm confusing stuff. It has to make sense to me. Okay? So this journey is going to be that process of trying to make sense out of something. Okay? And I'll start this out. How many guys here have had some experience in firefighting? Just about everybody here. Perfect. Those of you that haven't, you're better off than the guys that have. Okay? You're going to have it easier. Okay? In fact, you don't have to relearn old stuff that was wrong. Okay? That puts it harder for you to learn what the right process is. And when I say the right process, it has to add up. Okay? 1 and 1 have to make 2. 1 and 1 don't make 3. And in a lot of the stuff that we have in here, they try to say 1 and 1 makes 3. It don't. Okay? And so with that, let me ask you guys a question. Okay? So the question I always ask every firefighter I meet. Okay? And I travel around a little bit, so I get the opportunity to ask quite a few guys. Or if I pull up to the gas station and I see that sticker on your car, if I see you have a shirt on, or I say, hey, you work for
Home County Police.
Home County, yeah. But you guys cheated. Did you go through our class over there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So with that, so he can maybe answer the question. We can ask him and see if he can. Okay. Because there's more to the question. We'll ask him the second half of the question since he's read it. So, Chelan, Chelan County. Have you had our class before? Been introduced to it?
No.
Okay. How many people have been introduced to this fire behavior class? Okay, 2 people. Good. So I want to make sure I ask you guys some questions and see how much you guys remember.
How many were there? Sorry,
2.
I had my back turned.
Here and there.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So with that, let me ask you guys a question. Okay. How much fire can you go in and put out with an interior NFA fire attack? Who's got the answer?
Sir, Recruit Peterson, sir, with a 750 gallon tank, running an 1 3/4 line, 200 gallons a minute. Should be able to fight fire for about 6 minutes with 150 residual, about 600 square feet of fire.
600 square feet of fire?
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
that's good. So that's according to the NFA fire protocol, right? So what kind of fire? That's the 4th question.
It'd be normal, normal class 1 type fire.
So how many BTUs per minute per square foot is that?
I'm sorry.
How many BTUs per minute per square foot is that? Is
about 40,000.
BTUs per minute per square foot. That's what we're going to cover today. Okay, so a good point on coming out. The NFA fire formula is square foot divided by 3, so we got that, okay? So typically I ask what kind of nozzles, what's your flow, and how much fire you can put out, okay? So with that, most of you guys cannot answer that question. But even that, just like you saw here, good point, good picking on that, they can't justify how much, they can say it's square foot, but they can't say what kind of fire, okay? So I'm going to give you, in that fire, okay, you have 10 billion BTUs per minute per square foot of fire. Can you put that fire out with your water? No, you can't. Okay, not even near. Okay, so the point being is you have to understand the heat in the fire. Okay, you can't understand the heat in the fire. If you have water and you're going to go fight the fire, you got to understand the heat and you gotta understand the water. That being said, right there, ooh, right there, two things, that's all there is to firefighting. There's only two things. Water and time. That's all there is. Pretty simple then, isn't it? We're gonna get through this quick today. Okay? It's only water and time. So you have to understand the heat in the fire, which is what we're going to go about doing today. We're going to try and explain the heat in the fire today, okay? So you understand where you're going to go, what the heat in the fire is, because you're going to have to put water on that. So if you don't understand how much heat's in the fire, how do you know what your water's going to do? So if you don't understand the heat and you don't understand the water, what do you understand going on in that fire? So if you understand how much water you have, but you don't understand how much fire you can put out, what do you have? Okay? And I say this like that nothing is that you're going to get in, that water can actually kill you. Okay? By going in and doing that, by applying it improperly under the right circumstances. And so you have to understand what you can do and what you can't do, capability and limitation. You have to understand that capability and limitation. And that's what this journey is about, is understanding your relationship to your environment. Okay? Just like everything out here in life. If you don't, this job you have to be, you really have to be aware of your relationship. Everybody thinks, that, no, that's BS. You're just going to be doing something or the right stuff. Well, that's because everybody fights garbage can fires most of the time. Okay? And the relationship of that garbage can to that, to how much water you have, is no problem. So you get, I can do it. Okay? The problem is all of a sudden they run into something that ain't a garbage can fire. It comes up against the limit of their water flow. Okay? Then they release. And I'm going to show you what that relationship is today. And I'm going to show you, that you don't have any time out there. When that fire comes up against your fire flow capability, you have no time. So when you come up, you need to be able to recognize what that is. Okay? And that's what this is all about right here. These two things right here is being able to recognize what that is, to be able to see what you have. Now, seeing what you have doesn't mean all the time you get to see it. Okay? A lot of times you're going to feel it. But feeling is the same as seeing, because I know exactly what's taking place. I'll use my senses to determine what's taking place in that fire, how fast it's taking place, and what that relationship is to me and to my environment. Okay?
Chief, I want to make sure I got the right email address up there. Is it Ralph.omelet or just RalphOmelet@Hotmail?
It's Ralph.omelet@Gmail.
Gmail.
RalphOmelet@Hotmail.
Okay. You want me to put the Gmail one up
No,
there?
that Hotmail one's fine. Ralph Omelet, yeah, that's right, that Hotmail. Yeah. That's it.
So don't, an easy space to want to go right here is, oh my God, I'm a recruit. My company officer is going to understand fire behavior. He's going to tell me to grab the line, stretch it here. He's going to tell me everything to do, right? And I don't have to worry about learning fire behavior. That's an easy spot to go right here. Don't go there, because you'll never get the opportunity to learn fire behavior like you will right up here at the academy. Have you received your schedules?
Yes, sir.
How many of you looked at your schedule and said, how many days are we going to burn? Okay, a few people. How many days is it?
23.
23. Okay. Is anybody else familiar with any other academies? Which academy?
I moved out here from Colorado.
Okay.
So various number of burn days.
Did you? Yeah, you don't know.
Where that.
So nobody's ever attended an academy before? You did? How many burn days did you have when you went to that one?
15, 16.
Oh, good.
So you've been to a fire academy before then? 4 How long? You've been to 4 academies? Okay, then how come you didn't answer that question?
It proves Chief's point, right? The training's not out there. The perspective that we're teaching up here, that training's not out here. I've seen some other people talk about or raise their hand experience with academy. Go ahead and share right here.
CBC, we did 3 burn days.
What is CBC?
Columbia Basin Community Tri-Cities at the Hammer facility.
Is that with Class A or propane?
Propane.
Propane.
So how many BTUs per cubic foot in propane?
So it's a different fire, right? Chief is outlining that it's a different fire, and you're gonna learn that.
Well, again, it's a fire that's put, that's, so you need to understand the heat of your fire, so you need to understand what that is. Okay, so that being said, let me just make a quick comment before you get into it. So with that, what the mistake we make when we do those facilities, okay, is that we don't draw the relationship to ordinary fire. So we have Class A burning, and then we put, you know, a flammable gas in there to relate to Class A burning, but we don't cross over the heat release rate or the heat of fire development with that. We just say, oh, it's fire, fire, it's fire. No, it ain't. Okay, there is a specific process that takes place in that fire development that gives off heat in a certain way, and that's what that gas doesn't match, and it doesn't match. So therefore, why am I giving you a heat that doesn't relate to where you're gonna go work? I'm not training you in anything. Not to pick on the hammer facility, but that's the mistake we make in this industry. Okay, we think just fire is fire and that's all we have to have. Wrong, okay? And hopefully you'll see that as we go through this process. Okay, go ahead, Todd.
Oversimplification, right? If you have a basketball team and you have a court, don't you make the court and the height of the basket the same size as regulation? Do we go to structure fires with propane burning in? Where they burn up the wall and across the ceiling, and they're coming out of propane's coming out of a bed or out of a
Most of the time,
kitchen,
99% of the time, which type of fire we have with Class A material, it's not a combustible gas. Okay, it's not a gas fire. Okay, so that's what Todd's saying there. No,
we have to train with what we're being exposed to.
now if they can relate that information across there, yeah, that could be. So then, what is that? That fire hits the ceiling, rolls across the ceiling. How fast does it roll?
Don't you want to know?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
What if you have to outrun it?
So there's numbers for all this stuff. So then when you know, just like you go on that fire, you know, you all park it up because you're going in there because there's a boogeyman in there. Okay? Because there's something in there you don't know. No, there ain't no boogeyman in there. And that's what we're going to take the boogeyman away today. Okay? There ain't no boogeyman in that fire. Everything is science in there. Okay? It's a natural phenomenon that takes place. We just haven't understood what that phenomenon is. Okay? And the reason we have it is because you guys are too stupid to learn it. That's what these guys are saying. Okay? That's BS. Okay? You guys are smart. You are smart enough to learn that stuff. Okay? They just think, I didn't learn it, so I can't learn it. That's a bunch of, okay? You guys can learn this stuff. You'll see that you will learn this stuff. You'll see how much this builds your confidence when you can understand to take that boogeyman away in there. Okay? You know that you can go in there logically and methodically and safely go into that fire and address it. Okay? That's what this process is about. So I want to make sure that, you know, I want you guys to, you know, you need to engage in this process. If you have any question at any time in this process, okay, you can ask me, and you can challenge me at anything that I say. Okay? So you can challenge me at anything that I say, and you can ask questions at any time on this process. I want you to understand this, okay? And I want you to understand that if I can't answer the question, or if I can't justify it, okay, then maybe I shouldn't be up here, okay? So, and that's the process. You need to question everything. Question everything, because if you don't understand it, it ain't going to do you any good. Okay, and by questioning, you're going to get answers. You're going to start to understand. Okay, you're going to understand what takes place.
I'm gonna go make some copies real quick, and I'll be right back.
Okay. Yeah,
Nice handouts for them.
So let me draw a picture of what I'm doing. What I'm trying to do right now is just get your guys' confidence to bite on and go down this journey with me. Okay? Turn to page 119 in your book. And in the lower right corner of that page, there's a picture. This is my problem that I have with NIST. Okay, NIST is the government agency that does all the testing for the United States. Okay, it does all the testing for the United States. The amount of threads per inch in your shirt is created by NIST. They set a standard for everything. The atomic clock, you know, everything is set by them. Absolutely, all standards are set by NIST. Okay. It's a huge government bureaucracy, and I mean it is a bureaucracy, okay? Now, a lot of the stuff they do is good. I mean, a lot of stuff they do, but there's a lot of stuff that they just flat miss the boat, okay? Like most of government, we miss the boat. And here's, I'm give you an example of that. So you read this thing, it says flash over can happen almost instantaneous. What are they doing there? They're creating a boogeyman for you. Boogeyman. Okay, no, it don't happen almost instantaneously. So what is almost? See, that's the problem that they have, is that they don't define almost. And that's, you know, now the guy that I kind of hassled with, I'm going to tell you some war stories as we go along here. I'm going to show you how, not that I'm doing the right thing. I'm not saying I'm doing the right thing. I just want you guys to use this stuff up here. Use that gray matter. Question these bureaucrats. Question your government. Question everybody to see that if it's right, that it has to make sense. Okay? Dan Madricosta, he runs the fire behavior section for NIST. Okay, and for years I've given him a bad time, because I call him on whatever. I said, they put out a bunch of stuff like this. They put out, I'm not saying it, I mean, we use their stuff. Where's that? There we go. They put out a bunch of discs like this. And we're going to show you one today. And I'm showing you guys watch today. And we'll show you one of this thing. In fact, we're going to show you this one right here. Okay? The problem with it is there's no information on it. It's entertaining, but we're not looking for entertainment. We're looking for education. Okay? So it gives us a visual picture, but it defines nothing. Okay? It doesn't give us any perspective that we can work with other than a boogeyman. Okay? Because look at how bad that is. That's dangerous. Okay? Just like here, it says almost instantaneous. So what's almost? This is a scientific organization. The biggest and best one in the country we have. Almost. It's almost instantaneous. Boy, that's real scientific. So how fast is it? These guys are supposed to know. And these are scientists that are supposed to have an understanding, that do all the research and work with all the other people out there in the world, in the United States, to determine the standards for this thing. And they come out with almost. No. What is the definition of flashover? Once it's on, oh, go ahead.
Chris Selexer. When fire reaches a point in the room where everything can auto-ignite at once, it's transfer the heat to everything else in the room and raise the temperature enough that they can auto-ignite all at one time, simultaneously.
Okay, and so if you would look, and that is part of it. That is kind of the understanding for flashover. So then when, how, and when does it? So that's the process that takes place for it to occur. So once it starts, how fast does it take place? Almost instantaneous. What is that? What is that? Well, there's two things that are taking place there. Okay. First off, you have to heat up the products in there, which is ordinary combustibles. Ordinary combustibles are wood, textile, paper. Okay. So with the ordinary combustibles, they have an ignition temperature. Now we're going to go over these over and over again. I'm going to give you guys this stuff. These numbers. When I start here, you're going to get this, just like the song. Okay. You're going to put that CD in, and you start listening to that CD, and pretty soon you realize that the CD just plays over and over and over again. There's only one song. Okay. And so you're going to get pretty sick of hearing this thing, and you're going to, even if you don't want to learn it, you're going to learn it because you're going to hear it so many times, okay? Because that's how we learn. We learn by repetition, okay? So I'm going to say this stuff over and over and over again, okay? And that's how you're going to pick this stuff up. Okay? That's how I pick it up. I know because that's how I learn, okay? If I see something, and I have to see it over and over again, okay? So what is instantaneous? Almost instantaneous. I hate to pick on these guys out, but I want to make sure that I put into your guys' head that you question everything. Because if I don't do that, I'm doing you a disservice. Because you're never going to understand this stuff. You need to, when you see stuff like that, you go, what the hell is that? What kind of information is that? Okay, almost instantaneous. Well, I know that it's wood that has to off-gas. Wood has to off-gas. Well, wood to off-gas has to reach a certain temperature. Scientific community, and we're going to give you what that is here in a few minutes. We're going to give you what that temperature is, what that process is, and what that history is for that to take place. Okay, but I know wood then has to reach ignition temperature 451 degrees. It will then start to off gas, and then it'll ignite at 451 degrees. Okay, So with that though, but to get that, this fire, has to grow and develop. This fire development, like you're talking about there earlier, has to roll across the ceiling. We're going to give you those numbers, and then it has to get everything in the room, the temperatures, as far as the ambient temperature in the room has to come up. The ordinary combustibles have to start coming up to their temperature. The gases have to come up to their temperatures, because the gases are what ignite, and the ordinary combustible gases that are coming off that ignite. Okay, but the thing that starts this whole process typically are the gases up on the ceiling that start this process. So with that, we have gas laws in the scientific community. There are gas laws. There's ignition rates on gas. And typically, as a rough rule of thumb, the ignition rate of gas, okay, under 15 foot in diameter is 30 feet a second. 30 feet a second. Now, is that instantaneous? Almost instantaneous? No. What is 30 feet a second? Any track people here? People that ran track in high school, or?
Faster than I can run.
Huh?
Recruit Maris, it's faster than I can run.
No, well, that's true. It's faster than all of us can run. But if you were a good track guy, you could run that fast. That's a 100-yard dash in 10 flat.
Okay.
That's how fast that is. Now, is that instantaneous? No. It ain't instantaneous. Okay? This thing has a process that we can understand, that we can start having a relationship to us as human beings and to our environment. Okay? And those things will get really complicated when I start putting in all the pieces on this. When I start talking about, the relationship of the fire to the size of the room, and our water application and our ability, and what takes place there, and then how that NFA and Iowa Fire Performance interact in this process, and how we then can offset this, and how we identify it. Okay, that's what this journey is going to be about. So, that being said, just like this little piece here in the book, we just pointed out, here's a NIST comment here on page 119 that says almost instantaneous. Now, we have just defined what almost is. Okay? Almost instantaneous means that if that fire means that it can ignite at 30 feet a second. So if it ignites, okay, 30 feet back here, okay, and it takes off and burns, is that ignites, then that temperature will rise how much? That gas temperature raises how much in temperature? Numbers to all that stuff. Okay, and that's what we're going to learn. You'll see how that process takes place. So with that being said, we'll start this journey of that understanding. So we're going to bounce around on this stuff. Okay, so make sure you ask questions. And what that is, to answer that question is, okay, so when that gas ignites, okay, it's going to, question?
I didn't have a question.
Don't flip me down. All right, no problem. So when it ignites, it's going to ignite, and then typically that's CO that ignites. CO has a flammable range of anywhere from what? What does it say in your book?
Recruit insert 12 to 50%.
12.5 to 74%. You guys, these numbers you need to get down in your head. Okay? All these numbers you want down in your head. The reason for that is because you're going to come into situations that you're going to use that number. Okay? You're going to use those numbers in your firefighting. Okay? So CO has a flammable range, so it has to have the right flammable range. So for that to ignite then, okay, and to come back, it had to hit its flammable range. So it had to hit its flammable range. That flammable range then is 12.5 to 74%. Okay, when it ignites, then it's gonna roll back. Now, as it rolls back, then that gas has an ignition temperature. What is the ignition temperature of CO gas?
Sir, Kurt Peterson, sir, 1128.
Okay, 1128 to 1208. There's some different numbers in there. Okay, ballpark numbers in there. 1128 to 1208. Okay, so with that, then it has to reach that 1128 degrees. Okay, and then that gas will ignite and roll back. Okay, when it rolls back, then so it ignites at 1128 degrees. Now, what did I ask? The question that I asked. What was the increase in temperature? What temperature is flame?
Sir, Kurt Peterson, sir, I'd say it just over doubled it from 451 to 1128 or more.
Okay, well, if 1128 is the ignition temperature of CO, it's got to go higher, right? So what is it, so the ignition, so then flame temperature, once the CO ignites, it's for a minimum of 1400 degrees. So it has a 300-degree increase in temperature. That's all it is, from the ignition temperature. So what, you guys can identify this, and that's what this here, we're gonna start off here. Hopefully I've confused you enough to get you going here, to get you to start thinking, okay, get your, get your appetite wet here to start to understand what this is, okay? So out there in the industry, we started this country, back in the 1700s, okay? And mainly we used wood, okay? And so then as we started building, getting more condensed, more packed in, all of a sudden they started burning the places down. So they had to try and figure out what was the problem. So they had to try and come up with a way to solve burning down the cities and towns and houses, okay? So with that, they started looking at what can we do to solve this problem? Well, they had to come up with what the fire was. Even those guys back then, they were smarter than we are today. Okay? Because they had to come up and they said, hey, how much heat do we have in the fire? So what they came up with was this thing. They came up with this. Okay, so they had to relate over, they had to make a guess about the hood. Like, they didn't use that to start with, they used just the ordinary stuff that they used and then burn it and set it how close to it and see what would cause that other building to catch on fire and cause it to catch the next one on fire, cause it to catch the next one on fire. But eventually what they come down to back in the mid-1800s, they started looking at this crib test. Okay, they started writing that crib. So they said, hey, we need to do it the same each time. Smart guys. We have to be consistent in what we do to understand the relationship of the fire to what we're testing. So they came up with the crib test. Okay, that crib test then is based on wood. Okay, and wood is what typically most of the stuff we use for building construction material, right? So with that, they didn't know this back then. We know this now. But that wood then puts out a certain amount of heat. How much heat is in wood? What's that? That's ignition temperature of wood. Okay? That is, again, closer to ignition temperature. Okay? How many BTU, what is a BTU? What is a British thermal unit?
The amount of energy it takes to have 1 pound of water rise 1 degree.
Okay? The amount of energy required to raise 1 pound of water 1 degree Fahrenheit from 60 degrees Fahrenheit.
Is that in your fire behavior chapter?
Yes,
sir.
Okay. So if we look at, so we're starting over here in this in the book. It kind of goes a little backwards, in aspect. They're not going to start the same way we are, but they are coming over here, and they're talking about in the book it's modes of combustion, the fire triangle, and fire tetrahedron, the science of the fire. Okay, so we're talking about the science, physical and chemical changes in the fire, and that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to describe that a little bit more in depth, okay? And actually, if you guys want to, we can go any way you want. I can put this fire behavior box out of my sequence, and we can follow right down with the book, and we can talk about each one of these headings here in line with the book. If you think that's going to help you more, which way do you guys want to go? Okay, we have to write back, make sure I cover the book anyways, okay? So because they wanted to make sure that we covered the book, okay? So what they're doing, and what they're doing right here on page 88, they're talking about, first off, they're talking about, the physical and chemical changes that take place, the modes of combustion, okay? So, and then they're talking about the fire triangle, okay? Now, with that in the book here, in this section, they're talking about the heat in the fire. When you go over here to page 88, it says the heat in the fire. Okay, what you're talking about, ordinary combustibles is wood, textile, and paper. That's it. Wood, textile, paper. Wood, textile, paper. Sound like something you want to remember? Yeah, it is. Okay, that is ordinary combustibles. Now I'm going to use that word ordinary. Okay, I draw a line, and this is, I always typically draw this in front of the class when I start, but here's where you guys are at. Right here, I always start a orientation spot, and this is where we're getting to right now. we're gonna draw a spot right here. We're starting a journey, okay? Just like anything that you do, you start from a certain spot. You know where you're at, okay? And when you start that journey, and you think, hey, I'm gonna go to Idaho, but all of a sudden I start on that path, down that path, and I run into a guy, and the guy says, oh, you're going out to Forks, huh? And I'm going, whoa, wait a minute, I'm going the wrong direction, so I gotta turn back, and I know where I started from. We have to have an orientation spot to find out if we're going the right way or where we're at, okay? Without this orientation spot, okay, I don't know where I'm going. You know, I gotta take off on my journey, but I'm going someplace, okay? I'm trying to get to a spot out here, but I may go the wrong direction because I don't know where that spot's at, okay? But in that journey, when I get lost, I always want to come back so I can go and get orientated to where I'm at. That orientation spot for me, or the journey that I start from on understanding heat here, okay, is based on wood, okay? And what does it say here in the book about the heat in the fire? How much heat is in the fire from wood? We just talked about a British thermal unit, okay? British thermal unit. How much heat's in the fire? 8,000 BTUs per pound is what the standard, okay, right here, is accepted. That is a standard that's accepted in our industry. Is 8,000 BTUs per pound, okay? So wood has 8,000 BTUs per pound. Is that right? No. Okay. Yeah. That's the standard that we say it has. Okay. But actually, wood has a range of BTU rate anywhere from 3,500 to 17,000. But we pick 8,000 as a standard. Okay. We pick 8,000 BTUs per pound as a standard. Now, this point right here and this thing right here are tied together along with this and along with that 10 pounds per square foot. Okay? The standard of the ASTM, that's my point here. My point that I use right here is ASTM E119 is my standard. That's my point. Okay? That's the point that I use to orientate to. And the reason I orientate to that because that is the standard of NIST of this country for testing building construction material. So they test building construction material using the ASTM 119 test. What do you think that test is established with? How many BTUs per pound? And how many pounds per square foot? 10 pounds. Okay. So there's 8,000 BTUs per pound, 10 pounds per square foot for the test. Okay. So here is, we have fuel, and that fuel then provides heat. But for that fire, for this product here, we have 8,000 BTUs per pound, 10 pounds per square foot. That heat is released from the fire with what? Once we get heat and we have fuel, what releases that heat?
Oxygen.
Air. 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 Well, the oxygen in the air. Okay, for us it's air. So the air releases that heat out of that fire. So there's a relationship then of that air to that load to get a quantitative amount of heat per minute per square foot. Okay? So what that is then is an ordinary fire, typically for this. Now this, back up a step here. The test today is a furnace test. Okay? It's not a crib test. They used a crib test. Okay?
Chief, can I say one thing before you go on?
Yeah.
The relationship with that air and that fuel, right? The fuel has to have some form of heat to bring the fuel up to change its form. What form are we changing to?
Gas.
Gas, right? So when the heat impacts the fuel, it takes all the moisture out of the fuel and it dries it out. And it dries it out until that fuel starts doing what? Pyrolysis.
And we can get heat and we can get pyrolysis, okay? But we're not going to get ignition unless we have the air. You have to have the stoichiometric ratio of that fuel, no matter what fuel it is, for that to ignite. Okay?
So you have to have these three components. When we take out one of these components, what happens to combustion, right? It doesn't exist, or if it already existed and now the air becomes limited, it goes into what type of decay, also called smoldering, right?
And we'll go over the numbers for that. There's numbers for everything.
So, if this fuel changes from crib to shredded paper, what happens to the heat release, the standard time temperature?
That's where we're gonna go right here with this, Todd. That's what we're doing here. So the point being behind this, we've got to establish a standard. You have to understand the standard, okay? We have to understand some place here to orientate to, okay? That orientation is here, okay? This is the orientation that you're gonna put in your brain to understand ordinary heat development. Because without this understanding, you can't get the heat in the fire. You need to understand how hot that fire is. And you guys, by the end of the day, you will understand by looking at that fire how hot the fire is. You will see it. Okay? And then you'll understand the relationship to the building and the relationship to your water and then the relationship to you. Now there's no boogeyman. That's how easy it is. Okay? It's that simple. Okay? So this is the surface to mass ratio of the fuel. This surface to mass ratio, 2 by 2 pieces of wood with 2 inches of airspace. That allows the ratio of air to fuel, which gives the set heat development rate for the fire. So everything is consistent. Remember we talked about those guys? When they first started the country, they built the log houses and then they would set them how far apart so they could see before they catch on fire. That's what this is. We're just we have an orientation of what the heat is on that fire. Okay, this heat then is this spot. So when we start testing, we understand the relationship to what we're testing. Okay, so we have to have a set load, which is 8,000. We have to have a set load of 10 pounds per square foot, and we have a set BTU rate from that load of 8,000 BTUs per pound. That relationship of the heat release from that, okay, is over a certain amount of time. That time there, this time for that test is based off of 60 minutes. Okay, it's based off of 60 minutes for this test. This is a 60-minute test or a 1-hour test. That test then at 8,000 BTUs down 10 pounds per square foot, okay, equates out to 80,000 BTUs for a 1-hour test. Okay? So in 1 hour, from the start of the test to the finish of the test, I will have burnt 80,000 BTUs in 60 minutes. That room then, in that test, in that box, typically the box has a ceiling of 8 foot high, okay? It's an 8 foot high ceiling, okay? It's an ISO box typically when they test that material, and 8 by 10 box, okay? The box then will not exceed 1700 degrees Fahrenheit in that 60 minutes, okay? So it comes up to 1700 degrees in that 60 minutes. In that process, Todd, you got the slide for that? Get a slide for this.
That shows the temperature.
Yeah. Just throw that up real quick. Okay, so there is a set of numbers with this. So they'll start off at 0. They'll go 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and 60 minutes. There is a number for each one of those, okay? So we're saying 1300 degrees Fahrenheit. Then it'll come up here and then it'll go blah, 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 down the line for us temperatures. Todd's going to throw that up. You got it up?
My computer started.
Yes, he's throwing that up. So that this standard time temperature curve, okay?
I'll write it up.
This became a standard in the United States in 1918. A standard. That is the standard that we worked off of since 1918. That's this spot right here. Okay? That is our standard for testing. Okay? It created that they use this set of numbers for this test. Okay? Standard time temperature. There's going to be X amount of heat every minute, this amount of heat every minute. So we use that information. Okay? I only use this piece on it here, though. We're only going to use this amount of information. Really, for us, is the pertinent, relevant information is first 15 minutes. Even though there's some other numbers in here that we look at that tell us what's taking place in this timeline. Okay, and I say that because the fire typically, if we read in our book, it said flashover occurs typically in what time? The average. So flashover will occur within what timeline? Not instantaneous. How much time before flashover occurs? NFPA handbook has that. NFPA standards have that.
Starting at ignition, we go through we got to go through discovery of the fire, right? We go through dispatching of units. We go through response of units. It all matches up with that. the fire development and the time that flashover happens, we try to match that up with where we are responding in on that. Should be some kind of chart, maybe not in this chapter, but somewhere in there. They talk, under flashover section, they talk about how long it usually takes. They don't affix a time frame with it.
I don't think they have a time number, they just say it's right in between the flow.
Yeah, so what, on the curve there, what they're saying is that on that curve, okay, coming across here and they're picking out here, okay, so we've got growth, okay, here, growth here, we got fully developed here, and we have decay here, okay, so we'll just flash over a curve
Between growth and fully developed.
right here,
Fully developed.
okay, it occurs right there, if, and that's what there's numbers for that, there's numbers that determine when flashover occurs, okay? And that if is if I don't have a certain amount of heat per minute per square foot of fire development. If the heat of the fire, okay, is not at 13.2 BTUs per second per square foot, then, and when that fires the ceiling, I'm not gonna get flashover, okay? Anything below that heat, so there has to be an amount of heat development off that fire, and that heat development rate is based off the surface to mass ratio of the fuel, and the surface to mass ratio then, with the amount of air coming to that, determines that BTU rate production. Simple enough? Okay.
I think I found the temperature range for flashover.
Okay, what does it say?
900 to 1200 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay, that's the temperature range. What they're ballparking out there, as far as they're saying, is the range of temperature that starts flashover. At the point at which flashover can occur. Okay, but that 900 to 1200 degrees typically doesn't occur without that 13.2 BTUs per second per square foot of fire development rate. Okay, so that. Okay, now is that with that 900, now why do they have, we just said that CO gas ignites when?
1128.
1128, but they're saying 900 now, that we can get flashover. So there's other gases in there that they're coming back and saying that these other gases that occur in this process can start and ignite CO and cause that flashover to occur. If the conditions are right, okay? There's a lot of things that take place out there that are possible, but not always probable, okay? So we work in the probable range, but we like to know what also is possible. So, but we need to be able to identify what those pieces are, okay? So Todd's putting the numbers up there for us, okay?
When it comes to gases in fire, can anybody tell me how many gases are created when combustion occurs? Does it mention anything about that?
Yeah. Okay, well, it mentions you've got your CO, your CO2, your hydrogen cyanide, various other gases. It really depends on the fuels that are burning.
It does, right? And because there is such a varying degree of fuels that can burn, that they cannot pin it down to how many different gases, but there is a speculation that there's over 1,000 gases created. Because the problem is that as the fire is evolving, the gases, imagine these molecules are out in the air hanging in there, right? Over here they'll mix together to create this gas, over here they'll mix together, and because there's air currents in there, they're always evolving and changing. And sometimes you'll see that in the certain circumstances you'll be inside a smoky environment, and a good example of this is in the flashover trainer. Has anybody ever done the flashover trainer, the Swede survival systems? So what do they call those flames that they see?
The rollover? Yeah.
They have a rollover that comes across the ceiling, but you'll see ignited out in the middle of this thing. What's that?
Ghost or snake flame.
Ghost or snake flames. What that is those are gases coming together, right, in the right mixture of flammable range and
Stoichiometric ratio. So
and the right temperature for them to ignite and go. So you may have rollover hitting the ceiling and coming across the ceiling, but out in front, out in the middle of that, you'll have these gases that come together and they'll ignite, right? So that's a good example of how it's always changing like that. Does that mean that it's scary to us? No. We go with the predictable. The predictable is the CO, right?
So what Todd's saying there with that is one of two things. Either that little piece that lit up that you're seeing there, it either hit us the right ratio, stoichiometric ratio, fuel to air mixture, and it had the temperature, so it could ignite, or it hit, that portion right there had the temperature, and then it ignited. So either the stoichiometric ratio or the temperature keep it from igniting. So, and most of the time, it's the temperature that keeps us from igniting. Now, in those burn boxes, and just like down here in the warehouse, you guys will see, when we burn down here, we get that all the way to the back of the warehouse. We have little pockets that'll ignite around there, because we get that, 11 to 1200 degrees on the ceiling, okay, down there. So we get 11 to 1200 degrees on the ceiling, but we get a high, above that 74%. So once that leans out in one area and gets into that 12.5 to 74%, then that can ignite. Meantime, it's above the 74, therefore it won't ignite. So we'll get these little pockets now and then that'll ignite in certain areas of the warehouse at the ceiling. It's always at the ceiling and at the floor, and therefore we get that ignition. Okay. So when the fire starts, this box here, the ISO box, and all the fire behavior box that we're talking about here today is based off of this 8-foot high ceiling. All this fire behavior is based off this. Don't forget this. All this behavior is off that 8-foot high ceiling. Okay, and we have to do that because it's based off the scientific community, and their test is based off that. We're going to correlate this, other than show you how to use this information above 8 feet. Now, is it reliable? No, that's where the common sense factor comes in. Okay, and it works, but it doesn't work real good. And we'll show you that, how to look at those pieces now they come together. Okay. So what we started off here with was ordinary combustibles. Ordinary combustibles are wood, textile, paper. Typically, the ASTM E119 test load is at 8,000 BTUs per pound and 10 pounds per square foot. They said that ordinary combustibles ignite at what temperature?
451.
451 degrees. How do we know that? What testing?
Wood.
Cotton fiber. Wood, textile, paper, right? Ordinary combustible. So they took cotton fiber, and from the cotton fiber test, they found that they had ignition anywhere from around 380 to 550, so they said, let's pick 451. That's why you got 451. Why do we have 8,000? Because they had a range of wood. They said from 3,500 to 70,000. They said, hey, look at most of it's 8,000. Okay, so we're picking some numbers. So again, it's in the ballpark. All the science, if you look at the studies and you look at this, if you read the NIST studies and you read the scientific community, okay, you read the journals and stuff, and you look at most of them will say within this ballpark, we're within this range, we're within 50 degrees Celsius. That's a lot of that. This ain't exact science, okay? So we're in the ballpark, but we got to know, at least we know what ballpark we're in. We got to know what ballpark we're in, okay? Then we start figuring out what base we're on, what's taking place. Well, we got to have an understanding of that. So when this fire starts, it starts at 451 degrees, okay? And then it starts to grow and develop. And so at that point right here, we're going to give you guys a little 10-minute break, and then we're going to go full force into this thing. So take 10, and we'll come back and start digging into it. Class, attention. Dismiss. Give you guys time to wake up. Now we start giving you some numbers.